So today's subject is developing a healthy mind. In fact, that's one of the most challenging problems of modern life. We have already discovered many techniques for developing a healthy body, but healthy mind is still eluding our human attempts to conquer and understand. Now, my purpose here is to give an idea of the Vedantic concept of healthy-mindedness. What healthy-mindedness means in Vedantic tradition, rather in spiritual tradition. Not the concept of psychological well-being or a satisfactory level of emotional adjustment or a subjective well-being or self-actualization, social adjustability. These are all criteria that we use for judging the healthy-mindedness according to modern psychology. But we know very well that there are still many psychological problems that cannot be tackled, that cannot be properly handled by the tools of modern psychology and psychiatry. The main problem of modern psychiatry and psychology is that we are trying to study, analyze, and solve the problems of mind at mental level. Vedanta says that the problems of the mind cannot be solved at mental level. Psychological problems cannot be solved at psychological level. Because our psyche or mind is a relative mechanism, and it is in its very nature to be full of vagaries, fluctuations, conflicts, and ideas. Because mind is defined in Vedanta as a manifestation of conflicting thought currents. That's how Vedanta understands human mind. A continuous flux, a flow of thought currents, many of them in conflict with one another. Now, how can we solve the problems of the mind at the mental level? Because we are using the tools of a sick mind to solve the problems of mental sickness. So there is an inherent inadequacy in that. Now Vedanta says, if you connect the mind, link the mind to a higher super consciousness that goes beyond, that is beyond mind itself, then mind becomes healthy. So, in contrast to modern psychology, Vedanta studies human mind at three levels: the subconscious, the unconscious, first, then the conscious. Till now, we have, of course, many commonalities between Vedanta or Vedantic psychology and modern psychology. The third dimension of mind, which really a transcendental dimension of mind, is super consciousness, which these days is called the witness mind, the subjective mind. In Vedantic philosophy, it's called Atman. Now, look at our own mind. Look at memories, thought currents. What is our mind? Our mind is full of memories and thought currents. When there is a conflict, in these thought currents and memories, we face problems. But mind is only a lower mechanism. Beyond the mind, beyond the consciousness, beyond the what they call the conscious level of mind, there is a superconscious level which goes beyond what we normally understand mind at the psychological level, which we call Atman. And this Atman is beyond thought currents, beyond problems, beyond memories. This Atman is the all-knowing witness, the subject, which doesn't participate in this drama of human life, in these various manifestations of memory, thought currents, and conflicts. So, perfect and complete psychological well-being is, in reality, a spiritual state, not a mental state. When we try to solve the problems, we are actually trying to run away from the problem or postpone the problem. Medicines, psychological counseling confining to psychological principles that doesn't refer to the spiritual dimension of human mind is only an attempt to suppress, to reduce the intensity, to run away from, or to postpone problems, not a solution to the problem. This is the first principle that is to be kept in mind in Vedantic psychology. I can give one graphic description of how psychological problems develop. Sometimes I know that many of our friends these days may not fully approve of quoting some ancient scriptures, must have been written around 3000 or 500 BC. But there is a reason why I quote. I can give an example why I am referring to this one aspect. About 2 months back, when I gave a talk on Emerson, the Vedantist, I drew a comparison between a very well-known verse in the Bhagavad Gita, that is the 19th verse of 2nd chapter. Ye enam veti khandaram yaschayanam mannide khadam ubhau no vijanito nayam khandi na khanyade. This is the 19th verse of 2nd chapter. In the famous poem of Emerson, the first stanza is a literal translation of this verse. Every word, the only additional word that Emerson uses is red slayer. But in Gita it is only slayer. The point is this Atman is a non-participant. All actions or actorship and doership take place at the sensory level, at the mental level. This Atman, the eternal witness, is Sakshi, the eternal subject, which is not involved in any of these actions, which actually take place at the sensory level. Now, if you read Emerson's life, you find he got a copy of Bhagavad Gita from Carlyle, who was a famous British socio-critic, who presented him with a copy of Bhagavad Gita, which was translated by Charles Wilkins in 1784. So when I quoted this, one of my close friends later told me next visit, well, Emerson was smart enough to figure out it himself. In a way, the universal spiritual truths can be reached, attained, experienced by all of us. But when we relate these great ideas as belonging to an ancient tradition, which were experienced by saints and sages and philosophers like Socrates or Plato and Aristotle, or the ancient Indian sages or Lao Tzu or Confucius, it becomes a common universal spiritual heritage. And when we read it, we feel we are in distinguished company, in the company of saints and sages and philosophers. On the other hand, if you try to say this is an independent contribution of my mind, it's like a branch of a tree claiming copyright. Well, I have nothing to do with this tree, nothing to do with the roots. I am an independent entity. If a small branch of a tree or a leaf of a tree declares independence, prepares a declaration of independence, it would be ridiculous. Similarly, these great spiritual truths have been experienced and practiced in their own life by innumerable saints and sages and philosophers who were great scientists in the field of spirituality. In their ranks you find Jesus, Buddha, Shankara, Ramakrishna, Saint Teresa of Avila, and so on. All these great saints and sages and spiritual teachers had this common heritage. They have made this common spiritual contribution to human civilization. That's the reason why I quote the scriptures, because we started this spiritual journey long back, thousands of years back. So I shall quote one famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita. That's again in the 2nd chapter, where the teacher, Lord Krishna, gives a graphic description of how we become psychologically deranged, how problems emerge in human mind. The verse is this: Dhyayodo Vishayan Pumsaha Sangasteshu Upajayade Sanga Sanjayade Kamaha Kama Krodho Bijayade Krodar Bhavadi Sammoha Sammoha Smriti Vibhrama Smriti Bhramshat Buddhinasho Buddhinashat Pranasidi. Just 2 verses. Is a graphic description of depression and COD, which is called, this compulsive obsessive disorder, many problems of schizophrenia, many psychotic and neurotic problems. Here the teacher says our mind loses its balance. We lose our psychological well-being. How? Our mind is constantly drawn towards various sensory objects. Now, it doesn't really affect us. If we can look upon these sensory experiences without much involvement, inner involvement, which may be called attachment. I am here, the subjects, the seer, the experiencer. So many things are happening in the world. I am involved in it, but this involvement is only at the psycho-physical level. My true personality, my true dimension goes beyond the psycho-physiological. I am the spiritual entity, the consciousness. So, when we try to link our sense of being, our sense of what we are, to the transcendental, the problem is solved. If we remain at the psycho-physical level, there will be no solution, no permanent solution for many of the psychological problems that modern human beings are facing. Problems are not necessarily due to wants, due to lack of opportunities. In fact, there are certain problems which are called the problems of abundance. In certain advanced countries, where the state looks after all conceivable human needs, right from cradle to the grave, like in Japan, Holland, Sweden, Switzerland, some of the most welfare-friendly societies of Northern Europe. Now, in these countries, education is well looked after. You don't have to struggle the way you have to struggle here in this country. and much less than many of the people who had to struggle hard in the third world countries or South Asian countries. In these countries, in North European democracies, in countries like Japan, the state provides everything. The trains run on time. Your papers are promptly answered, executed. No problem. So the main problem is they don't have any problem. So Japan has got one of the highest suicide rates in the world. Why? And this is true in many advanced countries, which means mental problems, psychological problems cannot ultimately be solved at the physical or psychological level. They have got everything, but now the problem is what to do. Everything is fine, now what to do? That's a big problem. If you are suffering from a serious wound, it can be supplied. But suppose you have solved all problems in this world, then you are facing a much bigger problem. That means there is something wanting, there is a vacuum within. Our sense of what we are needs a reinterpretation, a re-explanation. Now, Lord Krishna says, we look around, we see things, our mind gets attached, and then we struggle to obtain these things. We don't always succeed. We become frustrated, we become angry, we lose our balance, and we are lost. This is one part. But there is another problem. As I said earlier, when all your desires are fulfilled, then mind is seeking for another explanation. What am I? This question. Here, Lord Krishna makes an interesting statement. We are not participants in this drama of life. Our senses, our eyes, our mind, our five senses of perception, eyes, ears, touch, smell, and so on. All of them are engaged in different actions. But that real I is something beyond all this. So and this real I is one eternal, immortal, deathless, universal, all-pervading, omnipresent, immanent reality. Its true nature is eternal, immortal, permanent blissfulness. And this blissfulness doesn't come from outside. This blissfulness comes from within. Our true nature is that we are eternally blissful. And eternal blissfulness is what is called the permanent state of psychological well-being, when you go beyond the psyche, when you go beyond the mind. Such a person can be active 24 hours of the day. He can be right in the midst of these duties and responsibilities. He need not run away from life. He can do everything. But even when he's engaged in duties and responsibilities, he can remember within him, well, my true nature, my real home is this all-pervading Atman, superconscious reality. All the great saints and sages and godmen and godwomen became great. They could teach, they could inspire, they could provide peace and harmony to humanity because they had a glimpse of this eternal blissfulness, which is a state of perfect identity with the whole creation. When the barrier between me and the other is gone, when a person realizes his oneness with the whole creation, when he realizes that the whole humanity is one spiritual family. Most of the problems arise out of loneliness, which is the cruelest thing in modern life. A feeling of loneliness, left alone, being left alone. I don't have anybody. This solitude, the cruelest psychological state problem people face in modern times is loneliness. And again, loneliness along with memories. That's what we understand when we read problems in modern psychiatry. Memories and loneliness. Vedanta says that we are not alone. We are one eternal spiritual family. The whole creation is one. Then what about memories? This may appear to be a high-sounding metaphysical, ontological principle. But when we read the lives of great saints and sages who worked not for themselves, but for others, who didn't struggle hard, who didn't spend toil all their life just for making money, just for making their own life more luxurious, but also worked for the psychological and physical well-being of others without thinking of receiving anything in return, except the inner contentment that we normally feel, well, I have done something good. The only reward is, well, I have done something good, which will have a soothing effect in our own psyche. Now, if we study the lives of these great saints and sages, you can include all the great founders of religious traditions, whether Buddha or Christ or any great saints and sages, born in all cultures, all traditions, many of them remaining unknown to us, unknown to history. So all of them did experience this unity with the whole creation. That's how they connected to the superconscious, the transcendental. So when we are able to connect our mind to the supra-mental reality, Atman or superconscious reality, then what is happening, a small canal is linked to the mighty ocean. Then it becomes immortal. A canal, a small stream may get dried up when there is a drought. But the mighty ocean will not get dried up. So when the small stream is connected, linked to the ocean, then you get a permanent supply of water. Similarly, when we link our mind to this Atman, which by its very nature is of the nature of serenity, harmony, eternal peace and tranquility, then mind calms down. In actual life, there's a technique that is prescribed by many interpreters of Vedanta philosophy. One method that they repeat again and again, it has been repeated in many Buddhist traditions also, that is looking upon oneself as this transcendental superconscious reality and interpreting this reality as a non-participant, as an eternal witness or subject, in contrast to the manifold objects. Now, if you go to a theater and watch the drama that is taking place on the stage, you may for 3 hours or for 2 hours, you may identify yourself with what is happening on the stage. But still within your heart, there is the feeling, well, after all, I have paid $10 to see this drama. So to do justice to $10, I have to forget that this is not real. If you go to a film, and while watching the film, if you remember, it's only a mixing up of different photos and makeups and play acting, then you won't be doing justice to $10 that you have paid to purchase a ticket. So to do justice to that, you forget for the time being that it is not real. Now, in real life, if we could do that, then we can keep the mind in a state of perfect balance. In real life, what we normally experience is not actually real. If we go to Disneyland or these places, 3 hours, you pay money. For 3 hours, you forget the reality and you identify yourself with the unreal, maybe for 3 hours. In real life, we frequently identify ourselves with the unreal, maybe for 100 years, if we live for 100 years. So the difference is only relative in terms of space, time, and causation. In real life, we do for a long time. In a theater or a Disney World, you do maybe for 3 hours. We take the unreal for the real, and we take the real for the unreal. We are the witnessing subject, and all these things are really unreal. That's a reality, but we interpret the unreal for the real. Now, this is one technique that was later on developed by an important school of Buddhist philosophy, which is called Yoga Acharya or Vijnanavada, subjective idealism, where they witnessed this method. So because they combined yoga, meditation and Buddhist philosophy, they came to be called Yoga Acharya or Vijnanavada, which is now interpreted under different categories in modern times. In the Gita, Lord Krishna gives a picture of a person who really is able to look upon the whole life as a drama, as an experience that is happening that is unfolding in front of him without himself participating in it. He compares a healthy-minded person to an ocean. The verse is this: Apuryamanam achalapradishtam samudramaba pravishanti yadut taddut kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantimapnoti nakamakami. The reason why I quote these verses to emphasize the point, I have no copyright to these ideas. Because these things were not just taught, this was experienced by saints and sages. So we are all in distinguished company of saints and sages. Now the comparison is this: a healthy-minded person is called Sthita Prajna. The literal translation is Sthita Prajna Yasya Saha Sthita Prajna. That is the compound description, we call Samasa. Now Vigraha means a person whose mind, intellect is in a state of perfect steadiness, tranquility. That is the description. You find this description in the Gita, 2nd chapter, from 55th to 72nd verse. In 18 verses, there's a long description of how a healthy-minded person lives in this world and how to develop healthy-mindedness. Now he says, as I said earlier, the healthy-minded person is like an ocean. Innumerable rivers are emptying their waters into this ocean. The ocean doesn't go and invite these rivers to come towards it. The ocean doesn't say no when these rivers flow towards it. The ocean remains a witness. Similarly, if we can look upon our own life, these manifold experiences, as a drama, as something that happens on the stage that we are witnessing, sitting on the gallery, without participating, then our mind will not be affected. You know, most of the problems are related to memories. That's a big problem in modern times. How do you fight memories? In very many psychiatric cases, conflicts, obsessions. See, washing mania. The man, if a child, he must have been beaten by maybe his father, grandfather for not cleaning things properly. He may have eaten food with some poisonous bacteria matter on his hand, must have got a disease. or a person who goes on checking whether the door is locked properly or not. Even if he was a child, he must have had an experience. A burglar must have broken into the home because the door was not properly locked. Of course, in Vedanta and yoga, these experiences need not be related to this life. It could come from previous life, of course. That's the difference between yoga, Vedanta on the one hand, and psychology. Psychology takes into consideration only memories and experiences pertaining to this life. Yoga and Vedanta takes into consideration memories and experiences belonging to innumerable past life. There may be a question that many people may ask, how do we know that? So Vedanta says, memories which are inseparably linked to names and forms are related to experiences in this life. Memories which are abstract in form without any association with name and form come from previous life. Because we lose memories of names and forms when these experiences are coming from another cycle. So now coming to the subject again. Memories are a very big problem. Innumerable problems are related to memories, conflicts, many different forms of schizophrenia, all related to memories. What are memories? Memories are re-experiences. When we remember something, we relive a previous experience, not at the gross level, but at the subtle level. So in memories and dreams, what is happening is, the latent memories come to the surface, and mentally we re-experience, we relive those experiences, which creates conflicts. Now, here, this in the Gita, Lord Krishna gives a picture of a healthy-minded person. He can completely dissociate himself with these memories, bundle of memories. How? Because he is not involved, which is called detachment. You use this detachment as a sharp tool to break, to cut the link that connects you with unpleasant memories. In fact, in the 15th chapter of Gita, Asanga Shastrena Dridhena Chitva, there is a literal expression which literally means you cut these memories, this bondage, this link with a sharp weapon, and that weapon is the weapon called detachment, non-attachment. And this detachment could have a negative connotation, but here it only means you try to liberate yourself from the tyranny of previous memories by telling yourself, well, I was only witness of all these things that happened. I was not a participant. In fact, we are all witnesses. These things don't last long, just as a drama doesn't continue after you have left the theater. The experiences that you experience in Disneyland, you can't have once you leave that place. Similarly, when one experience gives place to another experience, it is gone. But again, memory comes back to the mind. Memory is a great help, but forgetfulness also equally a useful tool. In the same chapter, in the Gita, there is an interesting statement, Matta smridit jnanam apohanam cha, where the teacher says, not only memory, but the skill to forget the unpleasant memories is also my gift. In fact, it's a great blessing, and it's a great to be able to forget the unpleasant or the unnecessary memories. It is as important, maybe it's much more important than to remember all the right things. So that's the point here. Now, but if you try to forget, you find at psychological level it is impossible. You try to forget something, Go on struggling to forget, which means you will be remembering it all the time. I told you that example earlier, but it is very relevant. A teacher, a young man who was losing his hair went to see a doctor and wanted a medicine for this problem. The doctor thought he was trying to take him for a ride, making fun of him. So he said, well, you stop thinking about an egg. That means you should never think of an egg. That is the medicine they give. And so this man, from that moment onwards, started struggling not to remember eggs, which means he was always remembering it. And he became completely bad-headed. So if you, psychologically, if you try to avoid doing something, you will be doing it again and again. Mind really goes towards those things which you try to withdraw it from. Then what's the way? Detachment. A feeling of non-involvement. Once you look upon yourself as the witness, then this link is broken. And when you break this link, then unpleasant memories, conflicts, all will cease torturing our mind. If you deliberately try to forget, it is impossible. Not only that, the result will be the opposite. You'll be always remembering it because you're struggling to forget. So first you have to remember, then only you can forget it. But if you use the tool of detachment, slowly that unpleasant memory starts fading out of your mind. This is the method used here. So we should look upon ourselves as the witness. The word witness, again, is used in Sanskrit with a strong metaphysical implication and psychological implication. The word is sakshi, which means witness. Now, who is a witness? You cannot call yourself a witness if you are not aware of what happened. Say in a drama, the curtain is there, the walls are there, different equipments are there. You cannot call them witnesses because they are not aware of what is happening in the drama. They are not involved, but non-involvement alone cannot make you witness. You should be non-involved. At the same time, you should be aware of it. So awareness and non-involvement are two aspects of witnessship. That is in Buddhist tradition also. Perfect awareness plus non-involvement. That constitutes the psychological, the metaphysical aspect of being a witness. In Sanskrit, it was defined by Shankaracharya, who wrote the commentary on Upanishads, called Sakshitvat, Bodhritvat, Anasaktitvat, Sakshitvam. That is the definition. Means, a real witness is one who is aware of it. Being aware of it, he is able to keep himself away from it. Now, this is the only way to forget, to leave behind unpleasant memories. Now, in Vedantic psychology, human mind is, as I said earlier, is defined as a bundle of thought currents, tendencies, impressions. Based on the state of mind, Vedanta psychology, yoga psychology, both together, divide and classify the whole human mind system into 5 categories. 5 types, from the grossest, the most restless, psychologically the most unhealthy type, to the highest state of mental health, healthy mindedness. In Sanskrit, these terms are used: Kshipta, Mudha, Vikshipta, Ekagra, Niruddha. 5 stages with Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra stage, and also in Vedanta, of course. Now, at the lowest level, we have certain people who are restless, who are suffering and enjoying, mostly people belonging to different psychotic and neurotic problems belong to this category. Those who are suffering from the highest type of mania, manic depressive psychosis, and also melancholia, two extremes. Both belong to this category. It's called kshipta, where you become terribly restless, manic depressive psychosis. And at the same time, you become extremely stupefied, dull, incapable of doing anything, mind not being able to concentrate on anything. That's the most degraded state. This state corresponds to many of the problems of modern civilization. Working for 12 hours of the day, and then you want to run away from yourself, something torturing the inner mind, you feel a vacuum, and people take to drugs and alcohols, belong to this category. That is the kshipta state. Second state is where a person becomes almost a vegetable, psychologically speaking, without being able to do anything, stupefied, or maybe infatuated, psychologically enslaved by some sensory pleasures, getting completely lost, not being able to think of anything higher, sublime, not being able to take interest in education, literature, the music, or anything that we normally associate with modern human civilization. The third stage corresponds to the state of mind of many spiritual seekers, common spiritual seekers. When we read a book, when we listen to lecture, when we pray, when we meditate, we feel a great interest in spiritual matters. Suddenly we become aware that it is not enough to spend all the time and energy to make money, wealth, and comforts. There is something higher that we must look for. At this stage, we become interested in spiritual life, but that interest doesn't remain permanent. After some time, we lose interest and we go to the other extreme, like a pendulum that moves from one extreme to the other extreme. We are not able to sustain the same level of interest in spiritual matters, higher thinking. Mind suddenly goes down to one level, and then people take to drugs and all that. At some other times, mind goes to a higher level. We read books on mysticism, we meditate, we pray, we discuss spirituality, philosophy, and so on. This is really a state which corresponds to the state of spiritual seekers. At this stage, we are not able to distinguish consciousness from the contents of consciousness. This is one skill that every spiritual seeker, to begin with, should try to develop. The consciousness is not necessarily the same thing as the contents of the consciousness. Our mind may have many thoughts, conflicting thoughts and associations. They should be looked upon as distinct and different from consciousness itself. Once we try to distinguish and differentiate consciousness from its contents, then slowly we will be able to concentrate more and more. Mind becomes calm and quiet. Mostly the problems arise when we misinterpret consciousness for its contents. Contents are objects, thought currents, memories, and so on, which come and go, which are always in a flux. Consciousness should be looked upon as a platform on which all these come and go. The platform is permanent. Thought currents are not. So, at the third stage, if we can look upon our own personality as a platform, as a consciousness, and all the conflicting thought currents and fluctuations that suddenly takes our mind away from spiritual thoughts, like a pendulum swinging in the opposite direction. Once we develop this skill to differentiate consciousness from its contents, then slowly we will be able to concentrate much more. And this state leads to the fourth stage, is called Ekagra, the state of concentration. People who reach this level will be able to devote all their time, energy, and powers of concentration. Time, energy, everything, for one sublime goal. It may be art, it may be mysticism, it may be science, especially during the time when scientists had to constantly contemplate on their scientific theories and formulas, when they had to lose themselves, their own personality. People like Newton, he could not have recorded all the data in a computer. So great scientists till around maybe the beginning of maybe till 19th century were great thinkers and philosophers. Great scientists were great seekers of truth. What they discovered were the truths of external nature, but still they were fundamental truths. But when we start depending upon modern gadgets, one can store all the data in a computer and get completely intoxicated for the rest of his lifetime. Because there is no need to remember, to be constantly thinking about a great scientific truth. So at the fourth stage, we start evolving to a higher level. Great mystics, great painters, I'm talking about painters with some philosophical, spiritual content in their creations, master creations. Great musicians, great sages, they all have reached the fourth stage of concentration. The fifth stage is the highest level of experience, mystical experience, where we transcend all the vagaries, where thought processes come to an end, modifications come to an end. These normally we describe in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra classes. But because these 5 states and an understanding of these 5 states is very crucial, is a key to understand what we normally mean by healthy mindedness. We can never remain mentally healthy if we try to solve mental problems at mental level. So, the first principle is we must try to seek the deeper, the higher dimensions of our own personality. And when this happens, we are able to link our mind to something higher than mind itself, which is Atman. To give an example, as I mentioned earlier, a stream which could get dried up is linked to a mighty ocean which remains eternal and perennial source of water. So, going back to Gita, Lord Krishna says, a healthy-minded person is like an ocean. He or she is not agitated by what happens around her or him. But he or she is always active, but doesn't go after action, but doesn't run away from action. So, apuryamanam achala pradishtam. It remains in a state of perfect tranquility, peace, and balance. And rivers, hundreds of rivers empty their waters into this ocean. The ocean remains unaffected. Why? The ocean is not very particular that all the rivers should flow towards it. The ocean doesn't say no to the rivers when they flow, when they bring their waters towards it. The ocean remains unaffected. Now, Taddut kamayam pravishanti sarvesa shanti mapnoti na kama kami. Pure description of healthy mindedness. That person attained perpetual peace. Which person? A person who is able to remain a witness by practicing this doctrine, this ideal of non-attachment, non-involvement, with perfect awareness. So that person alone can be always active, can remain in the midst of modern duties and responsibilities, at the same time remain unaffected. Somewhere within our heart, we must keep this idea that, well, we need money, people need money, they need wealth, they need many other things, but there is something higher and beyond all this. Without that, these things may give me momentary pleasure, but they may also give me grief and misery in the form of either neurotic or psychotic problems. So mind should be allowed to go beyond itself. Mind should be allowed to transcend itself. And for that, either you can practice religion, mysticism, or at least keep a high, sublime ideal before us. If the ideal is related to worldly enjoyments, then we are heading for psychological disaster. But if the ideal takes us beyond worldly pleasures, then we can live in this world physically healthy, at the same time with a sound mind. And sound mind doesn't mean often, in some constitutions, and the constitutions of nations where spirituality is not emphasized. In fact, the state should provide for the spiritual welfare of the citizens. It means parks, exhibitions, gymnasiums, nightclubs. In some states, I had occasion to read these constitutions of certain countries which practiced atheistic political ideologies. Some of them have collapsed in recent times, thank God. Anyway, but in their constitutions, if you read, you find spiritual welfare of the proletariat or these citizens means more parks, more theaters, more ballet, and more wonderful things to enjoyment. So spiritual here means that something that goes beyond mind, something that goes beyond momentary happiness and momentary unhappiness, something that convinces us that we are one eternal, immortal reality. Healthy mindedness is our natural state. Unhealthy mind is a foreigner, in fact. If we go back to our own real state, which is Atman, then we will all be always in a state of perfect healthy mindedness. In fact, mental ill health is a foreign body. Mental balance, perfect tranquility, peace is our true nature, because these are different dimensions of the eternal supreme consciousness we call Atman, which is called Satchidananda. And its most important, psychologically most relevant aspect of this absolute reality called Atman is, it is of the nature of eternal blissfulness, which is the highest state of mental health. So thank you. We will discuss this matter during interaction. If there are questions from you. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. That's it. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.